All right, we are recording. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is Jessica Trimble, and I am the Director of Communication and Outreach here at Indiana Disability Rights. And if you did not know, October is Employment Month. So this month we have been focusing on employment and individuals with disabilities. And so with me today, I'm super excited to have one of our attorneys with us that focuses on employment cases. So with that, I will throw it over to Zaida and have her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Zaida Maldonado Prader, and I'm a staff attorney here at Indiana Disability Rights. Like Jessica explained, I'm the attorney in charge of the employment cases. And I work here with two other ladies, Shari and Bonnie. They are the advocate specialists, and we assist clients that receive employment services through the Indiana Vocational Rehabilitation offices, and we also assist clients that have issues with reasonable accommodation in their workplace.
So when we're talking about these issues, we want to clarify a few things. We know that a lot of people like to call vocational rehabilitation voc rehab or VR. So we want to let you know those are all the same things. And something that's been very interesting, I would say since March of 2020, is reasonable accommodations at work. Those things have been changing. Some of those things that maybe you didn't need as a reasonable accommodation at work before COVID-19, you might need some reasonable accommodations now. So maybe you didn't need to talk to Zaida before March of 2020, but now things have changed and you might need to consider some reasonable accommodations. So listen in. Zaida is going to share some interesting information today. And if you do have questions about maybe some new reasonable accommodations you need in light of COVID-19 and maybe you're more susceptible, give us a call. So Zaida, I know this answer, but how long have you worked at Indiana Disability Rights?
Oh, I have been working here for 7 months. I started with COVID.
I know. So Zaida has been a champion. She started, and did you even get to move into the office with us? Did you just get to do all your training virtually?
Yes. I have been in the office only once.
So we're really happy to have Zaida on the team, and she has been a tremendous champion to be as flexible as possible throughout this process. So I was really excited when she was willing to chat with me on Zoom today, because I know a lot of you haven't gotten to know Zaida yet. So I was really excited to share her and her expertise with everybody. So far, I know it's probably different in so many ways from past jobs, but what do you like about working at Indiana Disability Rights so far?
Well, I like many things, but I think that one of the things that I enjoy most is being able to help people. Okay, that has always been my vocation. And here Indiana Disability Rights gives me that opportunity. So every time that I can work with a client and I can have my team, Shari and Bonnie, and we work together to find a resolution for employment issue that our client is facing, I'm really happy. I am really happy doing that. For me, we all aspire to be productive, to provide for us or our families and meet certain goals in life. So those are human aspirations. So my experience is that those aspirations are met when we are able to get a job. So that's why for me it's so important working in the employment team.
And I think we can say this for so many things, that employment challenges and issues have not stopped because COVID-19 came into our lives, right? Like those things are still happening and we still have to work and get things accomplished.
Yeah. We have had an increase in cases the last month after, we were back in our last phase here in Indiana, and we have been very busy.
Interesting. So what do you think has spurred on the increase in cases in the last month?
Well, we have had a lot of cases for reasonable accommodation.
Hmm.
And because of for the challenges, as you explained before, you are working in a different environment, and accommodations that probably before were not possible, or they were not considered reasonable, now that have changed. And we have a lot of impact in our workforce right now, especially those people that they have conditions that make them more in risk to be infected by this virus. So that has been very challenging, and we have seen an increase of those requests for those services. We also now VR was working, but it was not like full-blown working. But now many of the offices are back open, and they give appointments to the clients. And then we are having everybody, the focus the first 3 months of my employment was people was trying to survive and adapt to the pandemic. But once that phase is over, now everybody wants to be out and want to be productive.
I think that's an interesting thing to look at. You're right. It's kind of hard to remember where we were 7 months ago in March, but you're right. We really didn't know what the future held. We were just trying to figure out, how do we get our groceries? How do we get to medical appointments? How do we get toilet paper, right? Like, how do we get hand sanitizer and soap? And now that we've kind of moved past that phase, it's now, okay, how do we get back to some of these daily routines in a safe way now that we've gotten those basic survival needs met? That's a really good point. It seems quite a long time ago that we were having to do those things, but you're right. We've definitely had to adjust and say, okay, now we've got to get into a different space where we're learning how to live day to day in this adjusted reality. I don't know. I'm always having a struggle of what to call the way we live now. So let's talk a little about advocating during a global pandemic. I know in the past, our advocates and attorneys did a lot of work in person and meeting with clients in person and, meeting them out in the field. Obviously, that's not a safe thing to do for our clients, for our staff. So can you tell me a little bit about what it's like to advocate and work with clients during the global pandemic?
Well, it has been challenging, but it has been rewarding at the same time, because the challenges have been like how we can keep this contact with our clients. And as you well said, the technology is available, but it's still not available for everyone, okay? And even if it is available, some people have some disabilities that they cannot be able to use the technology, and that has been challenging. However, the good thing about Indiana Disability Rights is that from the very beginning we were very working together to continue bringing services. And I think that in that effect we have been very assertive. And I noticed that, yes, the first month it was slow, but it was not because we were not available. We have the platform. We were able to meet with people by phone. We have our intake team working. We have our cellular phones with us. We have our computer. So we were as accessible as we could as a group. So I think that we never stopped. We never stop. We have like a slow period because people was busy doing other things, but we were able to communicate with our clients. So we always have the way to communicate by phone, by email, by text messages, by letters. We like to communicate, and I think that was a good thing.
I think that's something that I've always been really impressed with our advocates and attorneys is it's always been about, no matter if it's a global pandemic or not, it's always been about how the client wants to communicate. If the client wants to do a video chat, they'll figure out how to do a video chat. If the client prefers texting, they'll text. So I think that's something I've always really respected about the staff of Indiana Disability Rights, is it's always about the client's preference and how we can make the client's meet the client's preferred communication needs. So I think that's something to let anybody watching know, is if you do have a preferred communication style or method, please let your, the attorney or advocate know, and we're happy to work with you on that. I've never heard an attorney or advocate ever not want to work with a client the way they want to, or communicate with them in the way they prefer. So that's something I've always just thought was really great about our team. It's never been an issue. If that's how the client wants to do it, then that's great. So still challenging, but it's not, I think you're right. That's not any different than what you've always done, is making sure the client is as comfortable as possible with communication. All right. So I know during this time, you and Sherry and Bonnie have been working with some vocational rehabilitation counselors to remind them about the client assistance program that we have at Indiana Disability Rights. So can you talk a little bit about the client assistance program first, and then I'll have you talk a little bit about what you've been doing with the Voc Rehab counselors?
Okay, well, basically the Client Assistance Program is a program that was established, I think that it was in 1984 by an amendment to the Vocational Rehabilitation Act, okay? And that is the law that is enforced by and put in practice by vocational rehabilitation services. And by virtue of that law, we exist. And our responsibility is to advocate and protect for the rights of people with disability here in Indiana. And to make sure that those applicants or participants of the vocational rehabilitation services, they are receiving the services that they are entitled under the law. So that's basically what we do with our client assistance program. It is also known as CAP.
So during this time, how have you been working with the vocational rehabilitation counselors to remind them about the client assistance program?
Okay, well, yes, when in June, once I have like 2 months of training with our senior attorney, Emily Monson, and that she was excellent, and thank God, I could survive those first 8 weeks. And I got more familiar with the system and working with Bonnie and Shari, we decided that it was a good idea to go out there and introduce myself. And because it is my understanding, I have not doing this for a long time, but there's some kind of changes with vocational rehabilitation counselors. So in order for them to know who we are and what we do, we started an outreach program, and for the last month, we have been visiting several areas. We have not been able to be present, but we were able, and they were very kind to agree to meet with us by video conference. And we were able to participate in their monthly meetings, regional meetings. And in those meetings, we have the opportunity to talk to the supervisors, with the managers, with the vocational rehabilitation services, coordinators or vocational rehabilitation counselors and their staff. So we have a better idea how they work, and we were able to talk to them about what we do here. So we have the opportunity, it's a working process, but for the last month, we have the opportunity to meet with the VR office in Terre Haute, that is Area 17. We have the opportunity to meet with the VR office in Lafayette, Area 6. We also met with Area 20 and Area 8 and Area 2. So those were mostly, based on my recollections, the offices that we were able to make a presentation and meet with them. It was very productive because There were some many questions about what we do here, what is our function as advocates when we have a client that receives employment services through VR. And they also had the opportunity to know a little bit more about the other areas of advocacy that we work, like housing and health and accessibility, and all the campaign that had been done for the census and for voting rights.
And I think something that you said that is so important is we recognize that in jobs, there's employee turnover. So that's just natural. And we understand that happens. And we know that when you're trained on a new job, you get a lot of information. And while people might be told about Indiana disability rights, it's easy to not remember everything. So this was an opportunity for staff members to hear about Indiana disability rights and the Client Assistance Program, or CAP, in a bit of a slower setting, a slower pace where they're not having so much information thrown at them, and also to ask questions. I think that's what's also really nice, is I'm sure they had some really interesting questions that were really thoughtful. Especially, I find that once I'm in a job and I've been doing it for a while, the questions I have are very different than the questions I had at the beginning. And I think that's something that's also interesting about the work we do, is just because you come to us with an employment concern, or you have questions about special or reasonable accommodations, that doesn't mean you can't ask us about housing or voting, or another area that you've got questions about. You're not only allowed to talk about a certain area of your life. And I imagine with VR counselors, they hear a lot about different areas of a person's life outside of employment. So sharing all of the services we provide and all the areas that we can help support was probably really helpful for some of those VR counselors who want to help their clients in areas outside of employment, but just weren't sure maybe where to go to for that kind of support. So I think that's really great that you got to share all the different things that IDR can do to support individuals with disabilities.
Yes, it was good. It was well received. Yeah.
Good. And sometimes I feel too, when you can actually see a person's face and hear them talk, that's the best way to start building a real relationship. Is you can get a flyer or see a PowerPoint slide with a number and say, oh, call this person if you have questions, but are you really going to do it? Maybe not. But if I'm seeing Zaida's face and hearing you talk and really hearing you say, please call me if you have a question, I'm going to be a lot more likely to call you. So I think that probably helped to really build those relationships with different VR staff members. So I'm looking sideways because my questions are over here. So again, the CAP program, you kind of talked about its origins, and you talked about working with the VR counselors. So how can the CAP program help people with disabilities who are seeking employment?
Well, we have two ways to do it. We call that advocacy and empowerment, okay? So the first way that we do it is if someone calls us and they just have a question, okay? And they just need to clarify what is a process. Many times the person just needs some information about what to do stuff. So we can give them the information, we can educate them, and we give the opportunity to the client or the person that is calling us to decide if they want us involved or not. If they understand that they feel that with the information that what we are giving to them, they feel that they can handle the situation, that's the best approach. Because that is the purpose of this law, that any person with disability can advocate by themselves. Of course, that is an approach that sometimes can be used depending on the situation that the person has. But that is the first one that we use. And that is what we call empowerment. We also give, the communication department, along with the attorneys, we have a very active campaign and outreach, and we have different resources online so people can know about the programs, know about the laws, and keep them updated. So that is part of the empowerment part that we work here. The other part is advocacy. the advocacy, we divide that in two areas. The first one is more that the informal one. In that case, we have people that call us every week, and then every Monday we have a meeting with the staff and the advocates and the attorneys, and we evaluate those calls and the needs that are presented to us and the request for services. We decide what cases we are able to work with. And when we decide that we're gonna take, for example, an employment case, that case is open. And that case is assigned to me and to my team, depending on the advocate and the location of the client. And then we evaluate the situation. We evaluate if there's any legal issue or is just more like a procedural issue, how we understand that we can better help the client to overcome that obstacle, okay, that they have. And that is what we do with advocacy, okay? Many times and many cases, and I will tell you probably with the experience that I have, probably the 90% of the cases that we have from people that call us that they are participants of VR services, VR employment services, we can resolve them with informal advocacy, okay? So we do a plan, we decide how we're gonna approach that, and then we begin working and communicating on behalf of the client with VR and the VR counselor. And that's how we work that. And most of the time, those are very successful. And if we have to meet 1, 2, or 3 times, we work together because the goal is that the person accomplish their employment goal. That is VR goal, and that is the client goal, and that is our goal. So if that approach doesn't work, then we use more formal advocacy. And that is when you have an issue, a legal issue, and there are 2 positions that they are not aligned to each other. So, and if the communication doesn't work, so we use the resources and the procedures that the participant has available under the law, so they can have this decision review or appeal. So that's when we go through the administrative review process, or we go through the court, state or federal court. Those are basically the 2 approaches that we use in advocacy. We also are very involved with systemic advocacy. And basically what we do here is that we have people that works with policy. And we are involved to some extent. Most of our staff is involved in doing some community service or involved in different like boards or groups that they want to advance the rights of people with disability. And that's the other way that we do it. And finally, if there's an issue that become a systemic issue that we identify in this jurisdiction, and we understand that we need to enter to be the voice of people with disability in Indiana, we enter in those cases. Those are basically the ways that we handle our cases, employment cases here.
And so something I think is always important to remember that you said that is important for all of our cases is our goal is empowerment, to let people know what their rights are and hopefully empower them to advocate for themselves. Normally, it's the quickest way for an individual to get what they need and to be able to move on with their lives with what they need, right? Like that's our goal. But we also have, like you said, a bunch of different tools that we can use if we need to do more. But our goal is to get this individual into employment or sustaining their employment as soon as possible and have them advocate for themselves. And sometimes that's all somebody needs, right? Is to just be reminded is, hey, I think this is my right, or I think I'm allowed to do this. Can you just confirm that for me? And sometimes people just need a short discussion to confirm what they already knew and for them to advocate for themselves. So I think that's another thing that I really appreciate about Indiana Disability Rights is our goal is to help you advocate for yourself as much as possible. And then we're here to support you as much as we can and as much as the situation needs to get you where you want to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So my last question, Zaida. So if I'm a person that is going to my first meeting with my VR counselor, what are 3 things I can do to prepare for that meeting?
Okay, well, that is a very good question. And I think that gonna define how successful your process with VR gonna be, okay? So it's very important that you get prepared. And one of the things that you need to do, because once you apply, you call or you file an application, you're gonna have a VR counselor that's gonna call you and gonna set a meeting. That meeting is what is called the assessment meeting. Basically, that VR counselor gonna talk to you and gonna gather information to determine if you are a person that is disabled and that gonna benefit with the vocational rehabilitation services in order to accomplish an employment goal, okay? So you need to be very prepared to that. And they're gonna be observing you, and you have to give them the information because they don't know you. So I think that one of the things that is important that a participant that is going through that first meeting does is, first, do you want to go by yourself, or do you understand that you need some help? Some help because you have some, you are shy, or because you have a guardian with you and you have a person that helps you to make important decisions in your life. You have that right. You don't have to be alone if you don't want to be alone. Okay, so you have to don't be shy, and when they call you, they tell you that you need to meet with your mother or with your guardian. And even if you don't have anyone and you need an advocate, you can call us, okay? And we can also help you in that process. Then the other thing is the location. Where are you going to meet with this person? People have different disabilities, and we are living in a time that this pandemic has changed everything. And you may be at risk, or you have like a mobility issue. So you need to be able to suggest and ask places that you want to meet. Let's say that for you it's very easy to meet in the library that is close to your house. Because of the transportation issue or the mobility issue, ask for that. If it is that you cannot get out of your house, ask for that, because you have that right. And they can accommodate that because that's the setting, the most comfortable setting for you to be able to have your first interview. The other thing, that if you need an interpreter, you may need an interpreter, an American Sign Language interpreter, or it could be that you are a person that you speak the language, but you still a minor, you have a guardian, and your parents' first language is not English. You have the right to ask for that. And it's important that you give all this information to the VR counselor when they call you, so they can coordinate and have those resources for you. Then if you understand that for you it's better working remotely, because I know that VR, they have been little by little opening like us, but there are parts that they cannot go or whatever. You do that. If they tell you let's meet remotely and you don't have the technology, you just tell them, because you need to be able to communicate with them. So if it is over the phone, it's over the phone. If it has to be in another location, it's another location. The other thing is that I think that sometimes people forget is that they need to be clear and bring, or at least have a mental list of what are their physical or mental impairments, because they're gonna determine if you qualify based on your disability, and they have a priority. system. So it's important that you give them information about your medical conditions. And if you have information about your doctors and they ask you for it, it's important that you have it at hand, because they can ask you to sign a consent so they can evaluate better what are your needs, you know, as a person with disability. Those things are very important. There's a four suggestion that I have here, Jessica, and I am sorry, I know that you asked me for 3, but basically is think in advance, what is the job that you would like to do? Because the reason of this is that they help you to get that job, to retain that job, to accomplish that goal of employment. So you think about what kind of jobs you have thought about you like, or even if you have never had the opportunity to work, what do you like to do? You know, your skills, your hobbies, because that's gonna help this person to help you to define and establishes the goals once your case is open. So those are the things that you need to remember when you meet with your VR counselor for the first time.
So this has been my favorite question. I was taking notes so I could review this with you to make sure I got everything, because I'm going to, in the description of the video, I'll make sure to list these things as well, because I feel like this was a super good list. And we're also going to have a blog post up that's going to probably cover some of this as well. So for the assessment meeting, ways you can prepare according to Zaida. Number 1, determine if you would like somebody to come to the meeting with you. Like you said, it could be for many reasons. If you're under the age of 18, if you have a guardian, or just because you want somebody to come and support you, you are allowed to have a person with you, correct?
Yes.
All right. Number 2, the location or setting. You get to determine what location or setting works for you due to whatever reason, mobility issues, communication needs. So in whatever those issues are, you can determine that location. Number 3, oh, go ahead.
In that, this is an interactive process that you're gonna have. So you make suggestion, and you need to be able, you know, it's like, I'm not telling you, tell them you're gonna meet here, but you have the right to suggest because you know what you need. And even if you don't know where, you need to tell them what are the needs that you have, in order that when they pick, or you and the VR counselor pick a place, you feel comfortable and it's accessible for you.
Okay, that is an excellent point. So just because they say we're going to meet here, if that doesn't work for you, you're allowed to say, could we meet somewhere else? Is there another option? So you are supposed to you can have a dialogue or a conversation to come up with something that works for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Number 3, you're allowed to ask for an interpreter. So that could be an ASL interpreter like we have on our video today, could be an interpreter for another language. And like you said, I thought this was a great point, that maybe even if you speak English, maybe the person that's coming with you doesn't speak English, or maybe English isn't your first language and you'd prefer to have somebody there to interpret in your first language. So you really make sure you understand everything that's being said and you have the right to request that.
Correct.
Then this is something that I will also link to in the description of the video, is you need to have a list of all of your limitations to help people understand why you need this assistance. We have on our website a big list that Bonnie Baumer and Emily Munson put together when Order of Selection came out, to help you. It's a big list of questions to help you kind of define your limitations. So making sure you have that all listed to help educate the VR counselor about what your needs are. And then this one I thought was really important too, is what kind of job do you want? What do you like to do? Those are really good questions, I think, for anyone, even if you're not going to VR, right? What do you want to do? What is interesting to you? So I'll make sure to outline those in the description of the video. But with that, Zaida, is there anything else that you would like to share about employment or the Client Assistance Program, or about your time here at Indiana Disability Rights?
Well, I just want to tell the person that gonna go through this process that after that VR will get back to them within 60 days from the day of their application. So they must hear from them about their determination of your eligibility, okay? And if that determination is not what you expected, you can contact us in case that you need to appeal. And there's an appeal process and there's a time limit to do so. And but also be ready to provide them any other information that they ask you in that process. Probably their assessment is not gonna end there. They're gonna contact you to get more information about your needs, about your medical condition, about what other services you need, because it's not only about I'm gonna need training for a job, or I'm gonna need to go to college, or I'm gonna need to have some training. You have challenges that could include like assistive technology, it could include transportation, and those things is important that they know so they can prepare you and help you to accomplish your employment goal.
All right. Well, with that, Zaida, thank you so much for taking the time to do this and answer our questions. I really appreciate you. And I'm so glad that you work at Indiana Disability Rights. And I can't wait till we get to do this in the same room together instead of virtually from our homes. I also want to thank Lisa and Angela, our interpreters for today. I'm always so grateful to have you here with us as well. So with that, thank you, everybody. We are happy to have you with us. And if you have any requests for people you would like us to interview or topics you'd like us to cover, please email us at info@indianadisabilityrights.org. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you.